Hey guys, it's Connor, and I've been gone for a little while, but over this past year I've learned so much and watched and listened to a bunch of different things, and some of those things include podcasts. So I wanted to try my hand at having an intimate and interesting conversation with people in a podcast sort of format. So I'm going to be trying to make some podcasts in the future. Maybe I'll stick with it, maybe I won't, but I just wanted to try this out. And I wanted to make this podcast the first of two that I'll be posting this week. It's about an hour long, and I, after listening to it, have discovered how inspiring and interesting it is, and I just hope that maybe you'll feel the same after listening to it. By the way, I will be filming the podcast that I do in the future, if I do any more. This one was filmed, but all the footage got corrupted, so I only have the audio. But that's fine, because it's just a podcast, and listening is the most important part of a podcast. So I hope that you can relax, sit back, enjoy Chill Chats with Connor. This is the first episode. All right. So today we are with Margaux Alexander and Raffi Alexander. Margaux is an inspiring photographer and graphic designer, and Raffi is a professional photographer. And this is Chill Chats with Connor. Okay. So I thought it would be fun to start off with, since Margaux and I are currently in college and Raffi has gone through a college-like experience. I thought it would be fun to start off with Raffi's story of how he came into photography and his college experience. So if you want to talk about that.
Sure. Photography came into my life because I was lucky enough to be friends with this very creative person, best friend by the name of Richard Jenkins. And he is literally the first person I befriended when we came to the U.S. from the Middle East. And we met in fifth grade. And Rick, who's this very creative, entrepreneurial type, had created a group called the Honor Guards. And it was our job to guard the drinking fountains after the doorbell, after the school bell rang, so nobody could drink. So it was our job to stand there. And that's how we became friends. I was one of his soldiers. And at that time, my brother and I shared an apartment with my parents, but we shared a bedroom. And we had this very boring-looking bedroom, 2 twin beds and a desk. And when I met Rick, he invited me to his house, and I went into his bedroom. And it was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. There were like cameras everywhere. There was a barber's chair. There was neon. There were these circus canvases and old Victrolas. Paintings. It just went, mannequins and antiques. It just went on and on. And he was only, let's see, how old were we? Like 12, 13 years old. And he was into photography. And his father was a professional photographer. And he and I became friends, and I really didn't have an interest in photography per se. And one day we were on the roof of our building, and he looked at me. He had his Nikons, his old Nikon Fs. He looked at me and he said, "Stick your hand out." I went like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Put your hand out." And I put my hand out with an open palm, and he took his camera and put it in my hand, and he said, "You're going to be a photographer." And that's how it started.
Wow.
I was literally like 13, 14. And that's where it began, my interest in photography.
Mm-hmm. So like when he gave you the camera, what did you like? Were you like, I can't be a photographer? Or were you like, I'm going to do this, or
did you
somewhere
ever,
in between, or like?
Did you ever think you were gonna do something else when you were 13? Like,
yeah.
I had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to be like Rick.
Because Rick was
cool. He really was a cool. I mean, he still is. He had the coolest friends, and everything he was into is just so unlike what everybody else was into at school. But at that time, I took the camera, started learning how to use it, and by the time I was 16 or so, and Rick kind of lost his interest in photography, or he wasn't doing it as much, and I had a girlfriend who was studying ballet. And she had to enter a competition or something like that. And she said, "Can you bring your camera to my dance school and take pictures of me?" And when I went and took pictures of the ballerinas, of the dancers, that's when I got the bug. And when I saw the results, I thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Okay. And Margaux, you can talk about your photography.
Yeah, I think that, not every kid gets to grow up in a creative environment like I did and my sister did. And it was something that was just not even, second nature. It was just like we grew up in a very creative environment, and it was just a part of everything we did, even things that were academic. We always found a way to be creative. And it wasn't even an option not to do something artistic going to college. And, my dad didn't even go to an actual college. I'm sure you'll get talking about your adventure in New York. But, it was a very big deal because, everyone thinks, the whole art path is just one path, but there are really a lot of different ways to kind of attack that path and go down. Go to a university for art school, or go to an art school itself and just study art, or don't study art at all, don't go to school at all and just begin practicing right away. So there were a lot of different options, even for an artist, to decide, okay, what do I want to do with these next 4 years? What do I want to do with the money that my parents are going to offer me for an education? There were so many options. I ended up, for people who don't know, I ended up at UCLA. I'm in my last year for a design program, a Bachelor of Arts. So, I'm getting half of a art career in education and also an education in general. So, while I do those art classes and design classes, I'm still getting, an outside education in places that I would never think I would, want to major or minor in. So, now I'm getting involved in music industry, and it's just really interesting how everything kind of starts to bleed into each other. So,
Yeah, that's cool. What do you think? I guess because you went without school and did photography and a creative, artistic passion. Did it take a more self-discipline of always doing it, and or do you think maybe it was your passion that drove you towards it, or how is it without school that you made a profession out of it?
Well, it definitely wasn't the rational thing to do, not to go to school. But at that age, you kind of don't think about it, and you just do things.
Sometimes that's the better way to do things.
Right. I wasn't going to go into photography. I mean, I love photography. I wasn't going to go into photography because my parents, they saw that I was very creative. I was good with my hands. I used to draw and so forth. And first, they said, you should be a dentist because you're good with your hands. And that's something I would not even consider. Then somehow we came to architecture, saying, why don't you be an architect? And that's the path I started taking by going to LACC and studying architecture. And then I got into a very difficult program in San Luis Obispo, architecture program, after 2 years. And I was going to go, and they would accept only 2 people from every state at that point into their program. So it was the beginning of summer. I was going to go to San Luis Obispo at the end of summer for architecture. And at that time, I met a woman at an actualizations workshop, which is a self-awareness workshop at that time. And we became friends in this 3-day workshop, and she stayed at my place, and I showed her some of my photography, and she said, oh my God, all the ballet photography. And she said, this is great stuff. And she was from New York. She said, you should come to New York and work for Martha Swope, who was the dance photographer from the New York Times art section. And, you're 19, 20 years old. I said, okay, that sounds good. So when she left, I said, can I stay with you? She said, absolutely. I told my parents, I'm going to go to New York for a couple of weeks to talk to Martha Swope, and then I'll come back and then go to school. Well, I went to New York, called her up, met her, and then she hired me she liked my work and she hired me. She said, if you want a job as an intern, you can come and start at the end of summer. I said, that sounds really great. And
you never went back.
And I called my parents and I said, well, guess what? I'm going to stay in New York. And I never went back. I stayed.
Wow. Do you ever think about what would happen if you had gone with architecture?
Frankly, I would have loved it because I love architecture. I love design. Even though I don't think San Luis Obispo was the right school for me. I think it was too technical of a school. And I'm sure it's a great school. Maybe if I was in another school, more creative school, I would have taken that path. But I think I would have enjoyed it. But in a lifetime, maybe you can do several things. And photography at that time was so far more exciting. I just couldn't deal with the math and science as far as continuing with my traditional education. Mm-hmm. It was becoming more and more difficult for me. I'm not that great at it. So photography seemed like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, which is what I did.
Okay. So do you think that's how you came up with the decision to go with photography? Because we're all in artistic fields for our work eventually, or what it is now. But thinking of people that are deciding maybe between art and doing something that is probably more structured and that will for sure make them money. What would you give advice to those people between choosing a creative passion versus a more structured I don't know software or anything else? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I think we look at it very black and white, how structured seems like the right way to go, and then a passion is what feels right, and for some reason what feels right isn't as valid as what is right, mm-hmm. or what is supposedly right. And more, even in a more structured environment at UCLA, I've realized your gut is the most useful tool. If you're not passionate about something, then any statistic isn't going to do you any good. You have to love what you want to do for it to have those statistics most of the time, at least I think. Mm-hmm. But
see, on my photography website, it says my work and play are one and the same. Mm-hmm. And that's the secret. It's when I have a long day of doing photography and I'm exhausted, I come to the studio. What I do at that point is photography for play. And to me, that's the secret. It's even if you go into a structured field where it might be easier to make money, if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to get that far. Mm-hmm. You have to be passionate about the structured field or whatever that field is. And if you are, you'll do really well in that field. I think that's the key, is to love what you do, because then it will happen.
Yeah. Is there ever a time or you're working on a creative project or something and you maybe second guess it, or maybe it's I don't know if I can do this? How do you maybe fight through that, or how do you deal with those feelings where it's did I choose the wrong choices? Is this really my passion? I think a lot of people, sometimes it's not black and white, what their passion is. Maybe you're interested in a lot of things and you have to choose between your passions, Mm-hmm. How do you figure that out, I guess? Or just thoughts on that sort of stuff?
Well, that is true. I think I doubt myself in every step of the way. Even if I'm going to, let's say, make pasta for dinner and I go to the store, I doubt myself. It's which pasta do I buy? This one or that one? What kind of sauce? Mm-hmm. Because I want to because I'm so driven and interested in making the most delicious pasta. Well, it's the same thing with photography. I doubt myself with every decision, but I don't view that as a bad thing. I view it as a good thing. The inner voice kind of guiding you and saying try this and try that. And I think doubt, it's like a road sign. So it's very helpful. So when the doubt comes up, I just breathe and I don't take it to heart. I just go, it's part of the process, and I tell myself I've done this 1,000 times, and I always come through and find the right way to do this, and this is another time, and it never fails.
And it's interesting to watch from an outsider's perspective. I don't know if you probably have noticed this already, but I've been here for 21 years, and I probably remember most of that, but watching his business, Spiderbox Photography, evolve over those years and watch him go from, I think the first taste of his photography that I got was traditional headshots of, lawyers and just very, very strict professional workspaces. And it's a very formula-based, photography, work. And from there, he started dipping into what's called stock photography, and he starts working for Getty Images and iStock, and that's more creative. So, maybe he had some doubt in that area of, this is kind of getting really predictable. I want to do something a little more creative on the side with that. And so that kind of evolved into iStock. And now iStock is at least half, if not more, of his career. And then iStock turned into, they need video. They need drone shots. He got really into droning. Now he's, trying to get his drone license. It's like, a passion can evolve. People forget that, and that's part of the process. You don't just, graduate from high school with a passion that stays the same till, you're 80 years old, whatever. It evolves, and evolution and change is very scary, and you have a lot of doubt, but I think that is the process.
Absolutely. Like what happened with the mics today is a perfect example of the creative process. Like we were having difficulty Connor was having difficulty getting the third mic to work, and we were so stuck on having 3 mics.
Yeah.
And then, one of us said, let's do 2 mics, and then it solved the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how I approach all the problems in photography or anything else in my life. Try not to be stuck in having it be a particular way. There's always a solution. Sometimes it's not the solution you ever imagined, but it's right there staring you right in the face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember with the first film that I did, to get into college, to send to every application. We wanted to use a hallway going into different buildings and stuff like that for kind of a long tape going through. And when we got there, the people, it was a work building place, and the people said, you can't go in, you can use the hallway, you can't go in these places.
Rooms,
so I completely rewrote everything, and it turned out even better that way. We added more.
If you hadn't changed that, you wouldn't have gotten into the colleges
that
you've gotten into, and it's maybe everything happens for a reason. It's fate, but
I've never had a creative passion that something didn't go wrong and it wasn't for the better most of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, your problems, as hard as it is to swallow at the time that you have the problems, are your best friends, because they'll kind of guide you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to another podcast, the Tim Ferriss show, and he was interviewing I think Joe Gebbe. He's the creator of Airbnb.
Okay.
And the way that whole thing started, to make a long story short, his rent went up, and he had to come up with a solution. And that's how he came up with Airbnb. He said, I'll rent it out to other people with an air mattress.
Yeah, sometimes I think limitations and problems can actually make a better product. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting because most people think if you don't have any problems and you don't have any limitations, you can make the best thing. But I think that when you have those limitations, you can start thinking a different way and get into the details and things like that make it maybe better.
Right.
Yeah.
It's having a little bit of fear kind of keeps you on your toes, and you're giving 150% of your energy to finding a solution, making something better, where if nothing's going wrong, you're kind of a little bit more laid back, letting things, slide that you would never have seen if you were a little more alert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So going off of that, we were talking earlier about the drone license that Raffi's trying to get right now. And I feel in the past that probably wouldn't have been an issue. Do you think that now there's more restrictions and things like that are put upon the creative process and stuff like that? Or do you think it's maybe a good thing or a bad thing? Or
No, I don't think there are more restrictions placed. I think we live in the most incredible time. The technology that's available to us and it's available to everyone is absolutely incredible. So I think there are less and less restrictions. The issue with drones is, drones can be very dangerous if they're not used properly, and So the whole licensing process is really about teaching you about safety. So because when you're flying a drone, it's so exciting, and you want to really break rules and take a lot of risks because it is so exciting and very addicting. And I think that's exactly what licensing does to really get you to calm down and just do it the right way so you have a safe flight.
But I think also, like, at least when I have listened to the technology part of your career, you know, you started out on film, and then all of a sudden digital comes around, and then these iPhones come around, and then everything becomes so accessible to everyone, and all of a sudden your career is just something that everyone, quote unquote, does. You know, oh, I'm a photographer too. I take pictures on my iPhone, which can be a thing that you do, but I think restrictions also, you know, filter out really the really great artists there and the people who really deserve to have their work seen.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm saying, you know, that people work on their iPhones aren't artists, but, you know, it does serve as a filter, and it provides, you know, a drive for if you really want to be a photographer, if you really want to be a droning artist, you got to pass these, you know, requirements. You have to get these licenses, and it makes your work worth something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's kind of gotten lost, especially in the digital field. It's like, what is your art worth? What are you worth? Because, you know, can anybody do that? It's a valid question.
Yeah, it's weird how, like, it's like crazy how culture has changed so much. Even taking photography, for example, where you had to spend like a good amount of money to get like a nice film camera, and you had to know how to use it and everything. And now everybody has like a camera in their pocket. Like,
Totally.
Yeah, it's like what do you think about that?
Well, I have a lot of feelings about that, and a lot of emotion and thoughts. I think for the most part, it's a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is completely overwhelming to see how many beautiful photos are taken every day by everyone. But I think what separates a professional with equipment versus someone with an iPhone is that the professional can do it every time. Well, the person with the iPhone probably can't do it every time. Mm-hmm. You get lucky, you get a great picture, or if the weather isn't right, you know, you don't say, oh, I'm not, the iPhone doesn't perform in let's say cloudy situations or indoors. Like the iPhone doesn't do very well indoors. Mm-hmm. So when I go on a photo shoot, I bring a lot of equipment with me. Yeah, I can take it on the iPhone, but well, what if something goes wrong? What if you need it?
Being prepared.
Being prepared.
Having the knowledge to be prepared.
And like just last week on Instagram, I don't know if you saw it, I put a photograph. I was on a photo shoot, and I was packing up after the shoot. And there was a big, like a 20-foot conference table, and I usually put all my equipment there as I unwrap, get it ready to put it in the cases, just to make sure everything. And there was so much equipment.
Oh, like the panorama.
I did the panoramic shot, and I said, "This is how much equipment it took to take one portrait." And I could have taken it with the iPhone too, but I think having that equipment there enables you to do a lot of different things. And sometimes when I shoot for Getty, they ask me to shoot with the iPhone as well. Mm. But the understanding I bring to the iPhone of how lighting works, I think really enables you to take a much better picture. But I decided from day one not to be threatened by the whole iPhone, Instagram generation, saying I want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a dinosaur. I'm 62, mm-hmm. and I could very easily see myself getting stale and kind of hanging on to the older ways of doing things. Like I switched from film to digital in the year 2000. That's when the big switch took place, I think, for a lot of people. And I'm lucky enough to say I knew how to do it the old way, but I completely embrace the digital age and social media. I love it. I think you guys are so lucky to have 30, 40 years more of it than I will.
Yeah, that's just what we grew up with for the most part.
You're so lucky. You have no idea.
Yeah. Do you think maybe it's harder to stand out from the crowd though? Like maybe like an aspiring photographer is having trouble getting their stuff seen as much because there's so much out there. Like maybe that it could be a problem with the generation of having phones in everybody's pockets, you know?
Well, there is so much out there, but look at the distribution platforms that didn't exist before.
Right. I was gonna ask, like, before social media, like, were you getting more or less exposure because of social media? You know.
Before the digital age and social media and computers, what a photographer would do is the way he would get work is send out promos. That was like a big part of a photographer's life. What promos? These promos could be anything from like a 5x7 card to something really creative and elaborate with the packaging and so forth, where you would create something and then you would buy a list of art directors and then you would mail it to them, and maybe you would do it every 3 months.
Well, that's really interesting because everything you're saying is tactile.
Yeah.
And everything in our generation is digital.
Yeah.
That's a very big...
And then you would call them.
Right.
And then if you're lucky enough to get an appointment, you have a thing called a portfolio, which was an actual portfolio case with your pictures in it. You'd go in and show them the work. I mean, think of how much it's changed.
Yeah.
So I think if you're into it, if you love doing it, you'll find a work. There's so much work out there. There really is. There's a lot of competition, but there's a lot of work. You just have to keep doing what you love and putting it out there in as many ways as you can, and people will find you.
Okay. Going back to like the film and digital thing, like you have totally embraced the digital, but do you think that there was some like aspects of film that were better? Because I know like in the film genre for me, everybody wants to shoot on like 35 millimeter if you're like a auteur, like sort of like director or whatever. And digital's almost looked down upon in that way, where like if you don't have like the best digital, you should try to do film instead. Do you think there's anything like resonance with that for you?
Well, there are two parts of digital. One is the capture and the other is the post-production. So which part are you talking about?
I was talking about the capture.
Yeah. As far as the capture, film is different. I won't say it's better. When you blow up a shot and look at the actual grain in your print or in the film, there is something more interesting and organic about it. There really is, versus grain. I can't explain it. It just feels different. The way you interact with it is very different. But I don't compare that to digital. It's like you can't compare a horse to an automobile. They're different things, and we still love to ride horses.
Yeah.
But you can't compare it to an automobile, even though they say horsepower, which is really interesting. So my feeling about it is, if you just embrace digital for what it is, and even if you shoot film, the incredible part of digital is the post-production. Capture is really the same when you think about it, except film has a better, more organic quality, like I said. But the way you capture, it's with pixels versus with grain.
Yeah.
It's the digital age. What it has brought is the post-production that makes it really interesting, which was not possible before, or it was very difficult to do. It would take a long time, and very few people would do it, and you'd need big budgets. So that part of digital you can't look down upon. It's amazing, and it's still growing every day. I think that there's a place for each. I suggest for anyone who loves photography to shoot film. The one thing that film does that digital doesn't is, when you're shooting, let's say you're shooting 35 millimeter, you would get 35 exposures in one roll. If you're shooting 120 like a Hasselblad, you're getting 12 or 24 exposures. Well, if you only have 12 exposures, you really think about each shot.
Yeah.
And you imagine it more in your mind's eye before taking it. You don't waste that film, because you not only have to take it, then it has to be processed. And in the processing process, you have to clip your film and see the exposure. If it's not good, it has to go back. The remainder has to go back to the lab to push it and pull it. So you really do approach it in a different manner.
Yeah, and it's so much more expensive to do all that stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah. My camera just turned off, so we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
And we're back.
You
Okay.
mastered that.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about maybe doing a film, a radio broadcaster voice through it, but I was like, that won't be natural, and it's just gonna I'm gonna have to think about it every time, and welcome back.
You already have a very good voice.
Yeah, you really do.
Thank
on
you.
audio.
Thank you.
So.
Well, there's such beauty in people's voices when you just listen to them, and I love hearing the inflections in the way people speak.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting how everybody hates their voice too. I noticed with
and everybody hates their picture too.
Yeah. Nobody I don't know. It's also it's not maybe it's a self-conscious thing, but it could also be I don't know. People just aren't comfortable with looking or hearing themselves. I don't know.
Well, it's funny because you can, with the eye, maybe it's hard to understand, but with the ear, what you yourself are hearing when you speak includes what's coming out of your mouth and what's resonating in your head and your skull.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not what other people are hearing at all. You know, no one's hearing, it's such a weird thought, but no one's hearing that
Nobody's
that
hearing
sound.
what you're hearing.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're hearing isn't really real, to be honest. So what you're hearing and what you're quote unquote hating about your voice isn't really no one else is hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a weird thought. And chances are there might be that same element with what you were saying about people hating their photos.
Mm-hmm.
What you're seeing, maybe there's something with the eye that, I don't know, it could carry over. But that's a very interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I think also, I don't know, maybe people have a vision of themselves of how they sound and how they look.
Oh, for sure.
And when they actually see it, it's not perfect enough, because your brain probably thinks that you're or maybe you think that you're more attractive, or your voice sounds more attractive than it actually does. I mean, not that there's a level of attractiveness,
right.
Yeah, but
I find hearing everyone's voice very pleasurable when you're mic'd and you listen to your own voice, and because you isolate it from everything else around you. And you really get into it. It's very much like smoking pot and listening to music. The music is so much more incredible.
Yeah,
you hear everything, every note, and it's the same thing being mic'd. So when people don't like their voices, maybe they haven't heard their voice properly recorded and played back.
Yeah,
it's the same with photos. When people and everybody I photograph, I mean, huge. High percentage, 95% maybe, they always sit down and say, I hate having my pictures taken. And I usually say, everybody that sits in that chair says that. And then they say, no, I'm really special. I'm really different.
Special.
And then I say, no, all the people that I say that to say they're different.
Special.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I did some modeling and stuff too, and I really don't like it's so unnatural almost, to just pose and stuff too.
Right.
Oops, I hit the table.
Yeah, well, maybe it's not a natural thing to see our reflection.
Yeah.
Mirrors are a man-made, manufactured thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we weren't meant to see our reflections in that way, and that's why it feels so weird, and we just instantly hate it without even giving it a chance. So,
well, yeah. African tribes had the right idea when you hear they wouldn't let you take their pictures because they would take your soul.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot. I mean, being a portrait photographer, I think there are a lot of very unhappy people when they see their photos because they see themselves so differently in their minds, and they're kind of shocked. I mean, I'm the same way. I always feel like I look like I'm 32 years old, but when I look at my picture, I go, oh my God, you're not 32. But the more you're photographed, the more you get used to it. So the more you hear your voice, the more you get used to it. And then those two realities become one.
Sure. Yeah. So we were talking about school earlier, but you had some thoughts about how if school is necessary maybe, or if you put your money in, will you get your money out? If you want to dive into that.
Well, it depends what you're interested in. I mean, I'm not in any way putting down school. I think education is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about college, not high school.
Right.
So then when you say college, and depending on the college, you bring in a price.
Mm-hmm.
How much does it cost? Again, for some fields, it's the absolute right thing to do. It's the only thing to do. But for other fields, maybe it's not the right thing to do, considering the amount of money it takes to get that education. To me, it just seems somewhat ironic. One reason we go to school is to become educated so we can get a job, so we can make money, and once you make some money, you buy a house. Well, how much does it cost to go to school these days? You know, maybe depending on the school, $300,000 for the 4 years. Some schools $500,000. Well, why not just buy the house from the beginning and then still educate yourself, but through different means, not the traditional college way. But that's not taking into account who you're going to meet and your professors. So again, I want to reiterate, I'm comparing the cost of educations versus to what you get.
I think it's hard because we want so badly with a lot of things to put a label and to quantify everything, and college can be that way. You can quantify how much you're learning, what are your scores, you know, by all these different ways of measuring, but there's some things that aren't measurable, and some things are fate, and some things depend on what you're exposing yourself to. And I would say that a big part, if not the majority of college, is who you meet and what you expose yourself to. You know, two people could go to the same college, major in the same major, but one person could follow textbook and just go to their classes, take their tests, get their degree, talk to nobody, go to no extracurricular activities. And you can compare that to someone who maybe does a little bit less of, you know, the textbook oriented ways, or maybe they do the textbook, but they also expose themselves to other things that maybe don't directly correlate with what they're there for. But it's just funny how things start to connect, and you meet one person who introduces you to another person, and you have this experience that maybe inspires you to go into something else. And, you know, it just takes one right light bulb for you to invent the light bulb, you know? It's like sometimes you just have to go through all of those wrong options for you to hit the right one, and then that sets you off for the rest of your life. And, you know, some people think that, you know, college is worth that, you know, trust and faith that, oh, hopefully in those 4 years in that $120,000 education or so, you're going to get that one right light bulb. And it sucks if you don't, you know. It's like a lot of people, you know, maybe aren't getting that light bulb moment in those 4 years, and they're starting to question, like, wow, I just put so much money and time and stress into that education. Why would I do that if I'm not guaranteed to come out with something, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different too with it kind of playing devil's advocate, where like we're all in like the creative fields, and I think like this is where it really changes between if college is worth the money or not, because you can pursue your creative passions without going to college, versus like people that are like software engineers or something like that, like they need to go through school. So like yeah, it's just interesting how like the creative passions, like we kind of have an option almost.
Right.
Well, currently I'm studying, as you mentioned, to take the FAA Part 107 drone the licensing test. And studying for this test, what I'm studying, I do not find interesting. It does not mesh with my brain. The language of the FAA and the maps and all the charts.
Hopefully nobody's listening from
But I've been studying just feverishly, loving every minute of it. And my wife said, isn't it interesting? Here you're doing something you don't like, that doesn't come to you naturally, but you're doing it because you know what the end goal is. And I think that's what's missing in in a lot of students' lives.
Bigger picture.
Especially at the high school level and first year of college, that they don't know what the end goal is, and they're kind of blindly going. Where when you know your end goal and you'll do whatever it takes, and you're passionate about it, you'll do whatever it takes, including if you're not good at math, learning math and whatever.
Well, I think that's what made my application to college a little bit easier than some of my peers, is that I at least really felt like I can see myself in 5 to 10 years and where I think I kind of want to go and what skills I want to use. And I was able to just really skip over that part of the unknown, which, not everyone gets the privilege of doing so. And, there are some pros to going through that kind of darkness. But, as hard as going through high school was and applying to college was, at least I could visualize my finish line. I played basketball in 7th, 8th grade, and then, first half of high school. And every coach I ever played with just said, you just have to visualize yourself making the shot over and over and over again. And I wondered to myself, oh my God, with the whole college application, that must be so hard to try to succeed in something that you just you can't even conceive the end result, the basket being made. And I just never really experienced that because I just had for the most part, a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do. And I still feel that way, coming on my last year of college. So it's a privilege, I guess, to know.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how also we went to the same high school,
right?
And our high school, it is weird if you do not go to college right after.
Exactly.
You stand out. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably 95% of the graduates go to college.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to know what the percentage of the number is of kids that come back from college. Mm-hmm. They're in this,
who don't continue,
right? There's this huge amount of hype, and if you are brave enough to just say no, that this isn't for me, I think you get ostracized and people look at you funny.
Oh, you really do.
But when you look at the numbers, I was reading someplace 50% of students who go to college don't finish college.
Yeah.
And just in our community, I know of several kids who've done the right thing, gone to this, spent all that money, and that they've come back because it wasn't the right thing for them.
Yeah, that's what my brother did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think some people don't need college, even from the start. But if they go to college, they really understand maybe what needs to be done in their life to pursue their career,
and
right?
what's available to them as well. Yeah. No, I totally agree on that. I think it's a shame though and there are a lot of things that I've noticed now looking back. I've noticed that, wow, there are some things that have options, but our superiors don't even shine a light on those options. And we stumble upon those options in the dark later on. Maybe it's too late. Maybe, it isn't too late, but it's scary. But it would be nice to know about, people like my dad who just did not go to college, and he now owns a very successful photography business on his own, self-run.
Yeah, we never hear about those examples. We
never hear about that. They have the panel with the person who goes to PCC, the person who goes to a state college, the person who goes to a UC college, and a person who goes to an Ivy League. Mm. 75% of those people could come back from school and just be sitting in the same spot of I don't know what to do, or I can't get a job, while someone who didn't go to college went and pursued a passion. And granted, he had tools and he had the right people to guide him through that path, but they just do not even set that up as an option. You have to either stumble it on your own or have the courage to ask about it and kind of be the odd man out. And it's very scary, and doubt comes in there as well. Mm-hmm. That whole thing of doubt, you really got to acknowledge it. It's there, but you got to put it to the side for a sec, because that path could be the same, if not better, than a traditional college experience.
Yeah. I ran into a parent a few years ago hiking on one of the trails here, and the parent was there with their 2 kids, and they were ecstatic. And I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Oh, both my kids finished 4 years of Spanish. They're done. is it 3 years or 4 years? Check it
Yeah,
off the
that,
bottom.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't speak Spanish by any means. And I turned around to one of the kids and I said like, "Hola, ¿cómo está?" or something like that. And the dad looked at me and says, "Don't bother. They don't speak a word." I went, 4 years of Spanish? I mean...
What a waste of time.
Well, because there isn't a passion or a reason to why you're taking Spanish. And I think a lot of the education is like that. Kids don't know why they're taking it, and they're just doing it to get good test scores and not appreciating how much that Spanish is going to help you later in life, and in terms of who you meet and the jobs you're eligible for, and being able to go to Spain and communicate to somebody in Spanish. That's not in the awareness, and I think that's where the schools fall short in really getting the kids to appreciate what education, how valuable education is. Number one, how much your parents are sacrificing to send you to college. And I think if those things were really taught more, maybe the outcome would be different in terms of people getting more out of college rather than debt.
I think speed and efficiency are being prioritized more than passion, which, can only get you so far. Yes, speed and efficiency is helpful in areas, but you're losing the quality over the quantity there, and that can really harm you in the long run, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy how like in high school we're never told why we are doing all the things we're doing.
That's the missing piece, I think.
The connection to we're doing this because of this big picture. It's just checking off boxes.
In retrospect, I would do anything to go back to school if I could, with the knowledge that I have in terms of how many great classes there are and what I would take and what the purpose of it was, and so
yeah, definitely. I took like 6 years of piano at when I was young, and I don't remember any of it, and I think that's largely because I was just forced to do it. And I didn't know why, and I didn't have a passion for it. And then I found guitar after that, and I did it through my own means, and I had my own passion for music and everything. And now I wish that I went into piano knowing all that stuff now, and then I would have been, I probably would remember piano now, but I didn't because I was just forced to. Because
that's funny you bring that up, because I also was forced to do, not forced, but highly encouraged, and you're a kid. Both my parents wanted me to take piano lessons, and it's weird because for a long duration of the taking the piano lessons, I hated it. And here I am, probably 8 years later, probably even more, 10 years later, 11, 10 years later, I really haven't touched the piano up until this last year, where I've done everything differently, and I've been playing piano by ear, and I've been really appreciating the piano for how it sounds and not how it reads on paper and score, which was how I was taught as a kid. And now I have such a passion for just every day I get up and I go to the piano and I just play, and it grows and grows and grows into more and more pieces that I know. But that's such a great example of, two ways of doing something. Again, I am, 11 years older, but, there are different ways of approaching learning a skill. And I don't know, in high school, a lot of the things I had to learn, I felt I wasn't learning in the best way possible.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think passion is really important to do whatever you want to do. Even this stems through the whole conversation we've had, through photography or film or whatever we've been doing. If you don't have a passion for something, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be satisfying, and it won't be worth your time if you don't have the passion for it.
For sure. Look at that. Look at that full circle Connor just did. That's impressive.
And from a parent's perspective, to me, listening to you play the piano, because I never told you to play the piano, is like gold, because that's what you came up with.
Right.
I mean, granted, you took the classes. As a parent, it's so exciting to see what my kids or kids come up on their own versus doing what their parents told them to do, because it's separate from me. And it's
you're not fashioning a child, you're letting the child fashion themselves.
Right.
We're not robots that are supposed to be built and put through directions, and maybe a little bit, maybe there are things in life that like that's just what you got to do, but it must be refreshing to see your child like develop something on their own rather than having to like build it into their system.
Yeah.
Buckminster Fuller, one of my favorite Buckminster Fuller sayings is, we're all born loving, creative geniuses, and as we grow older, some of us are less damaged than others. And I think the damage he talks about really does take place, a lot of it in the school system, especially in high school and junior high school, when there's so much going on in the body and the mind of young person. And the school doesn't quite know what to do with it, maybe because there's so many students and they're doing their best job, but a lot of kids get hurt, and their confidence is damaged, even though you might not even know of it, and yet deep inside, people are comparing themselves to each other, and they're the popular kids, but there are a handful of popular kids, and there are a whole bunch of unpopular kids. I think their story is far more important, and I think that's where the damage starts, and it kind of is a chain effect in life. I think if some of these things were addressed in school, specifically as we're talking about, having kids pursue what they love rather than alongside the curriculum. Mm-hmm. I mean, they try to do that, but still, it's I don't think it's addressed.
Yeah. I think I feel like the like math and science and everything are very important. But like, what would happen if I don't know, the schools treated the students more as individuals than like big chunks of people? Like what would happen if people were asked like what individually do you want to pursue, and maybe give the resources towards them in that way. I don't know if it's possible, but like, just the idea of that is interesting. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I listened to a lot of podcasts, and my wife turned me on to the Debbie Millman podcast.
I don't know.
And it's called Design Matters, and she was interviewing the man, I can't remember his name, who created the TED Talks.
Oh yeah.
And very, very fascinating guy. And he was invited to a particular college, I won't mention the name, where he had to give the commencement speech. And this was a college known for innovation. And he gave half the speech to the students. And then in the middle of his speech, he turned around with his back to the audience and made the rest of the speech to the staff, to the faculty, and professors. And saying, if you're a college that specializes in innovation, how about having innovation in terms of how you do a graduation? Mm-hmm. It's like, do these kids have to wear these gowns, these uncomfortable...
stand out in the sun all day.
Right. It's like, why can't they wear what they want? And why can't they speak their own names? And how about having the kids write the music instead of listening to this boring piece of... It goes on and on. It was very... I was cringing in my seat thinking, oh my God, I have to have a lot of guts to do that.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's.
But here we are talking about his commencement speech rather than the thousands of other commencement speeches that have happened.
I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So we're about to get to an hour, and this has been really fast for an hour.
Yeah.
It really has.
But yeah, is there anything else you guys would like to say in the last few minutes?
No, I think honestly, just to wrap it up, I feel so lucky to have been brought up in a family where you can just pursue whatever you want to pursue and not feel the pressure of needing to be super successful in a traditional way, and just having faith and passion, and I really do feel a sense of pride and confidence in running with my passion, because I don't know about my dad, but for me, I feel very different in a lot of ways around my peers in high school and in college. And before, I used to really feel kind of insecure about that, a little bit scared, like, oh, is being different not a good thing? You know, am I not going to make it? And now, after being in college for 3 years and watching myself run with that passion, I really do, for the first time, have a confidence and feel secure in the decision I've made. And I can really see myself in 5 to 10 years doing what I want to do. And I see opportunity every day where I could work, who I could work with, what I could be doing. And I don't know if anyone else can really say that, you know? A lot of people are still filled with this blind fear, and I just feel so lucky that I'm fearful. I'm very fearful and doubtful, but I have this blind faith in a passion that makes me feel a lot safer, and I have a lot of faith in being successful in what I really want to do, and I think I get that from watching my superiors do that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's incredible hearing that as your dad. Well, on a totally different subject, I'm completely captivated by the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Because it really, I can't wait to maybe do one myself or with you, because it really is the art of conversation brought back.
Yeah.
Which is something that's without alcohol.
Or drugs.
That is very relevant to Connor and I.
Well, that's a different kind of a conversation, which is just as fun. But this is something that's disappeared in our world, conversation. And I mean, we can literally talk here for 10 hours, I think,
sure.
and not run out of no awkward silences. I mean, think of when trying to have a conversation with someone that you don't know, and it's awkward, and you don't really get into the deep stuff. And
an on-the-go podcast kit. You just have a podcast with new people that you've met, and
just like a train ride.
So I've really enjoyed it, and I want to try to do this in my own life, have conversations like this.
Yeah, it really is cool, because you hear of like 10 people wanting to do a podcast, and then one of them actually does it, and that's you.
Yeah.
And then you start to inspire other people to do what they are like kind of simmering in the back of their head, like, oh, I want to start a YouTube channel. Oh, but I don't know. But like, you really give that confidence to the people who are doubtful. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and it's cheaper than ever too to do this. Like,
yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like it is a little bit expensive. You have to like invest a little bit of money in it, but like, it's definitely worth it. And I think conversations are so important, and that we've definitely lost that in like today's society. And like, I mean, like the deeper conversations are great to have, and like they don't happen enough. But yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. This is so much fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
All right, this has been Chill Chats with Connor. See you next time.